Veteran Canberra journalist Katharine Murphy is joining Prime Minister Albanese's communications team. Ms Murphy has been reporting on federal politics for 28 years, including a stint as national affairs correspondent at The Age. More recently, Katharine has been political editor at the Guardian Australia website. The exact role in the PM's office yet to be announced, with a new director of media also on the way. Opposition leader Peter Dutton, though, has reacted to the news by taking a swipe at the Nine newspaper political correspondent David Crowe, the Liberal leader, tweeting, "I'm genuinely shocked to see Murphy take up a spot to now be officially running lines for Labor. The real outrage is David Crowe missed out. What more must he do to prove his credentials to formally be employed by the Labor Party? Hashtag give Crowe a go." Let's bring in Shadow Minister for Home Affairs, James Paterson. Interesting response from your leader, Peter Dutton. What do you make of that? Having a bit of a dig at the outgoing Murpharoo to the PM's office and the Nine political correspondent along the way, David Crowe.
Kieran, I think that was a lighthearted way of wishing Katharine all the best for her new role, resurrecting the Prime Minister's tattered public image. I do think it's interesting. She's a very senior member of the press gallery, but also one very much at the progressive end of the spectrum from the Guardian publication. And I think it's interesting the Prime Minister's obviously much more concerned about his left flank if he's employing someone like that, much more than the middle Australia that he talks about. I'm not sure there are a lot of middle Australian readers of the Guardian, no disrespect to them and the work they do.
Interesting analysis. Wishing her all the best. Thank you for responding to that story. And as I say, it's an unusual contribution from the opposition leader when it comes to this appointment. But I do have some more substantive issues I do need to talk to you about. One of them is this decision by Australia to pause the funding for what's known as UNRWA. That's the UN agency providing humanitarian relief for Palestinians. Is this the right outcome? Do you welcome this, the fact that Australia, along with the UK and other donors, have paused funding to UNRWA?
It certainly is the right outcome, Kieran, but I am surprised it has taken as long as it has for the government to do this. They have been repeatedly warned about the risk of giving Australian taxpayers money to UNRWA. There are very well-documented concerns about UNRWA and the way in which it controls its spending and the people that it employs, particularly in Gaza. That includes using anti-Semitic material and pro-terrorist content in their school books that are taught in UNRWA schools. That includes allegations that funds from UNRWA have been siphoned and given to Hamas to pay for their tunnels and other activities. And it includes allegations that UNRWA employees were directly involved on the 7th of October in the terrorist attacks. These are very well-documented concerns, and yet on the 16th of January, the Foreign Minister announced an extra $6 million on top of the existing Australian government funding for UNRWA. And it has emerged today in the Australian newspaper that was after a letter from Jewish community leaders on the 19th of December warning her and the Prime Minister not to do this. Now, the Foreign Minister didn't even have the courtesy to respond to that letter and now has had to humiliatingly and embarrassingly back down by putting this funding on hold.
The Foreign Minister did meet with the head of UNRWA during her visit to the Middle East earlier this month, raised her concerns about the need for transparency and reform in the organisation, and then subsequently paused the funding. Isn't that the right course of action that she's undertaken here, given what a crisis those in Gaza are facing at a humanitarian level? The UN Secretary General says there were 12 people identified, 9 have already been sacked, 1 is dead.
You're right, Kieran. There is a genuine humanitarian need in Gaza, and there is a role for Australia to play there. No one is suggesting that. What we're suggesting is that UNRWA is not the right vehicle for it. And if the Foreign Minister knew enough when she met with the head of UNRWA in the region, when she visited, to have concerns about how Australian government money would be handled, that she needed to raise that with him, well, then the question is, should we be giving money to UNRWA at all? Let's remember that the potential alleged beneficiary of this Australian government funding is Hamas, an organisation which is listed in its entirety as a terrorist organisation. If an Australian citizen raised money or gave money that ultimately went to Hamas, they would be committing a very serious crime under the Commonwealth Criminal Code and could be prosecuted for it. So if the Australian government is inadvertently or carelessly participating in the same benefit to Hamas, then I think that's deeply concerning, and it was foreseeable. There's been warnings about this for years. The Foreign Minister should have been able to anticipate that and act accordingly by not giving this extra funds in this high-risk way.